Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. Did you know that today the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is 100 years old? Oddly, this significant anniversary has gone almost completely unremarked by politicians and in the media. Both groups, as you know, are usually lapping up an anniversary, and particularly a centenary. Scarcely a murmur. Oh my. I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And I bring news of the latest opinion poll, which shows that the yes lead has increased yet again. There is now, listen to this, there is now an independence majority in every single region of Scotland. Extraordinary. Just goes to show what a Supreme Court judgment can do. Maybe we need more of those. Thanks to you, the TNT Show and Indie Live are growing, and we're delivering more exciting shows. You can watch, for example, the TNT Show on IndieLive.net. It's streamed out on YouTube. You can see it on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, plus on YouTube. If you care to look back over the previous 121 shows, that's right, we've done 121 shows. You can see all of those on YouTube, and it doesn't cost you a single penny, not a sou. And now you have a chance to support Indie Live. If you're upset by the media coverage of political events, where journalism is often junked in favour of stenography or rehashed news releases, if you're looking for an alternative voice, well, you found it. We're here for you. But can you please be here for us? Please donate. You'll see the details on the screen shortly. Well, it's been another great day for British democracy. There's been copious coverage, you may have seen it, of the latest Groundhog Day, when the former PM repeats Labour's century-old promise to repeal the House of Lords. Sadly, I bring news that the upper chamber will no longer resound to the honeyed tones of Baroness Moan, who is off to spend more time with her money. Tonight we have a very special guest. We'll be discussing music, Scotland, independence, and show business, and much more besides, with award-winning singer Iona Fyfe. She is here for a full hour, taking your questions live. And there's still time to get your question considered. You'll see the details on the screen shortly. TNT, as you know, all your regular viewers and listeners, stands for The Nation Talks. So in many respects, this is your show. We're live and we're free. No license, no problem. We're here for you. Now, to our guest tonight, The Nation Talks to Iona Fyfe. Thanks for joining us, Iona. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good, yeah, but oh my goodness, it's Baltic outside.
It's Glasgow, I guess, and it's winter time. I guess you've got to expect that. But you've been traveling a lot recently. You've been in the States, you've been in Germany. How was that?
Yeah, and recently on Sunday I was actually in Dundee singing at the Trad Awards. Yeah, traveling is amazing and it's such a perk of the job. And all these places are brilliant to see, but a lot of the time you're very much seeing the car or the van, sound check, the gig, CDs, maybe a cheeky pint, and then bed, and then repeat. So yeah, we started, I did this, it was my first ever time working in the US. I've been there for something called Folk Alliance International, which is a music organization that I became a director of last year. So I've been to New Orleans, to Kansas City, but this was my first tour working there with, my visa. I can work there for a year. I've got more right to work in the US than I do in Europe now, which is ironic. But we started doing a tour in Southern California and then went up to Washington, Oregon, Montana, back to Washington. And I also taught Scottish song at a summer camp in Massachusetts. So I was there for a good 5 weeks over the summer and it was amazing. But it was interesting just to see how everyone deals with things over there. And also when I was there, so many things happened in the UK. We had the passing of Queen Elizabeth, we had Boris resigning, Truss being, installed, the crashing of the pound, it was interesting to view all of that from an American media perspective, because I was like reading the LA Times, and like it was really, really like back page news. It really wasn't. It wasn't that important. Yeah, it was also interesting to see the healthcare system, because I was working with 2 American musicians, and we got COVID on tour. One of the band members did. I didn't. I had the situation of, putting him up in an isolation hotel, getting him, paying him even though he wasn't doing the gigs, getting him a hire car so that he could catch up with us. So really difficult things. As a socialist, I was always going to do that, no matter what. Like, I would love that if I had an employer, they would treat me the same. But yeah, FedEx lost an unspeakable amount of merchandise. Customs claimed that they didn't lose it, that it was FedEx, and then the plant in the Netherlands claims it wasn't them. So yeah, the issues of touring abroad is huge, let alone with COVID and customs, and the fact that before you'd even kicked a ball, your visas, and the petition is costing thousands of pounds. So, luckily I had the small capital to put that out there. But really, I would say it was a great experience. But did I make money from working 70, 80, 90-hour weeks? No, I did not. It was brutal.
Something, it's the same with people who are authors. I've written a couple of books. My wife has written 10 to 15. And people say, you must make a lot of money. You've written all these books. They point to J.K. Rowling and they say, look at the amount of money she makes. And you try and explain that's a tiny percentage at the top. That doesn't apply to most people.
Yeah, that's like pointing at Taylor Swift and saying, hey, why don't you have this much money? Ironically, we actually do a Taylor Swift song in our gig, but it's a Taylor Swift song translated into Scots. So it's interesting. But yeah, I graduated from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland with a degree in traditional music. It's really cool that you can study Scots song. And people automatically think that you're privileged just because you went there, because it sounds posh, Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. But you audition to get in. It's not it's not a means tested thing. You audition, and if you're good, you get in. And I'm privileged to have gotten to go there, because education is free in Scotland. And a lot of my friends who studied, they were paying massive amounts of tuition fees, which I was so lucky not to have to pay. But yeah, people automatically think that if you're an artist, you're either dirt poor or filthy rich. I'm like, no, there is a just getting by thing. But I've been on the board of the Musicians Union, the Scotland and Northern Ireland regional branch, as they call it. I've been on that committee for a few years, and it's interesting to see the plights of musicians all over the place in all different genres. I'm just lucky that I have my autonomy and I don't have a record label and I do everything myself, because what's 10% of nothing? It's still nothing. I'd rather no share my minuscule pie with anyone else.
But you're right. I spent a bit of time in the States, and some of the distances that you mentioned en passant. Massachusetts in one breath and sentence, and then you're talking about Southern California. I'm not sure everyone fully understands that, there's 3,000 miles between those two places. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, I flew to Boston, and then I flew again from Boston to LA, and then we drove the rest of it. So that was an experience. But the musicians that I was touring with, they never let me drive, which is fair because my driving is dreadful.
Well, so you traveled up the West Coast by car?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's an experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it was beautiful when I wasn't asleep in the back of the car. Hi, folks. I'm just seeing some of the comments coming in. I agree. Brexit has a lot to answer for. We just got back from Germany. It was actually so expensive to fly with all of our gear that we, and of course the carnets, as we just had a commenter writing, it was easier to drive to Newcastle, get the boat to Amsterdam, drive across the Netherlands and then tour in Germany with my own car. I've put thousands of miles on my wee Hyundai, but yeah, it's becoming harder and harder to tour in our closest neighbours, and I just think that's so sad, because it's a market that's going to be shut off to us, and so musicians like me are looking to across the pond a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I'm going from Spain into Portugal on the 22nd of the month because the family's all getting together for Christmas. It's not unexceptional. But the boundary, the border between Spain and Portugal at the Algarve is a bridge. There's no barrier. You literally drive up. Honestly, it's like the Kingston Bridge. You drive up to and you drive out the other side, and you're in a different country. That's it. You know, the language changes obviously from Spanish to Portuguese on the road signs. Other than that, no impediment, no stopping, no passports, no carnets, none of that. You just drive across.
Yeah, it's a huge loss. And I remember, in 2018, 19, we were doing gigs and tours, that would have some Austrian gigs, some Italian gigs, some Switzerland, some, German, and it was just easy. Like because we were in a van, we'd have to weigh the van, but that's about it. And I say this over and over, but Brexit is a huge issue, and like the UK is one of the largest exporter of music to Europe, so we send more and more touring artists to Europe than any other country or nation in the world, which is impressive to say the least.
Yeah. But don't you find it a little bit upsetting, if not majorly upsetting, you tune into some television or radio channel and they're talking about these adverse conditions, and nobody mentions Brexit. They will tell you that it's down to Ukraine, or it's a residue of COVID, or it's down to some external factor like the federal exchange or whatever, but it's never down to Brexit. Do you find that?
I find in general business terms, people are always saying, "Oh, it's they're making the excuse of, oh, it's the cost of living crisis is the war, the war in Ukraine or the aftermath of COVID." But I find in the culture sector, I think people are a little bit more turned on to it's a compounded effect of Brexit and COVID. Yeah. We were always gonna come out of this in a bad. Brexit was never going to be a good thing for cultural collaboration, but COVID just totally what's the word? Just annihilated it for a good few years, and it's quite scary because for some emerging artists like myself, like that's a few years of our youth as viable musicians to that's when the pandemic started. I was 22 and now I'm 24, and I was supposed to tour all over the world, and that US tour was actually supposed to be 2020. It wasn't supposed to be this year, so there's just a lot of work going into rescheduling stuff, and venues closed, so we have to remember that if we don't have venues, we don't have places for musicians to tour in.
And yet, Sir Keir Starmer says that his plan, and I'm quoting him now, is to make Brexit work. What's your comment on that statement?
I just think it's a surefire, like, I just can't. I mean, it's a shame. When I was on BBC Debate Night, I turned around to Anna Sauer and I was like, perhaps, as a trade unionist all my life, if you guys were off the fence about, independence and you weren't cooling up to the Tories so much and their policy, maybe I would have been a Labour voter, who knows. But yeah, I've been hearing about his plan for extended devolution, and I feel like I've heard this before. I feel like it's a bit of deja vu going on. It's not what we were promised in 2014 of more powers, more I guess more funding for local government. That none of that really came through at the end of the day. And now they are going to be using the war in Ukraine and COVID as an excuse not to give us that. But yeah, I mean, I was way too young when Gordon Brown was in power to really comment on this, but it just sounds like a flimsy attempt at getting on side. And I don't think he will be on side. I think that he's been poor opposition consistently for the entire time. And I love PMQs because it was a pantomime all the time. I actually didn't manage to watch it today. I was swimming. But yeah, I'm gonna maybe have a look later and see how Stephen Flynn got on at his first Prime Minister's Questions.
Pretty good. Bearing in mind it was his first show, as it were. I mean, it's one thing to be in the band and the group. It's quite another thing to be up front, and because everyone then is you're the focus. It's a big deal. I thought he did exceptionally well, and in fact, we're rather hoping to have him on the show.
Yeah, I think he is an exceptional performer, a very good speaker. He's a cheeky chappy. He's always asking not funny questions, but he's always prodding at the right things. And I think that it was, it's exciting to see new leadership. And, I love Alison Toulis as well. And she has been so supportive of the Musicians Union and the bills that have been put through and voted down in the House of Commons around fixing streaming. She's been at all of the select committee hearings about streaming. Unfortunately, the Tories shot it down. Something to do with large record labels lobbying, I presume. But yeah, Alison Toulis she's Glasgow North. I think she's been great too. It's a really cool, if that's the standard, between the two, I'm happy that somebody from Aberdeen is going to be heard on TV every week, to be honest, because if politics aside, linguistic diversity is really interesting, because we're going to hear somebody that sounds different. Literally a dialect of Scots that he does use. We're going to get to hear that almost every week, and that is really good for linguistic diversity. And I actually miss the fact that Peter Chapman is no longer, he's retired, because I thought that it was lovely to hear the Doric being used consistently in chamber. Politics aside, I work with Vice, which is a non-profit. Well, it's not a charity at all, but we lobby government for a Scots Language Act, and we've had an AGM, and one of we've got a new committee member, Mark Finlater, who is a Conservative councillor. So it just goes to show that we need a cross-party attack when it comes to linguistic legislation, because that's really important. It doesn't matter where you're from or how much money you have or how little money you have. We all are speaking the same language, and we should fight for that. And the Gaelic Language Act was Labour Lib Dem. So this idea that Scottish culture, Scottish music, Scottish singing, the Scots language is an SNP agenda is absolutely ridiculous. And I actually love the fact that we've got people from all parties that are really invested in our culture, because online there's culture wars all over the place. You're seeing people shoot down the Scots language every single day. So I mean, we've went on a wee bit of a tangent, but I'm excited to see what Stephen Flynn does. I know that he is representing the people of the Northeast. It's not been an easy 10, 20 years with the decline of oil. I hope to see what we're going to do with renewables, because I don't see us moving forward with oil and gas. I think that we need to step forward towards net zero, and that's really important. I hope that my children, are living in a world where there's more hydrogen buses cutting about Glasgow. So I'm really excited to see what Stephen does.
Yeah, and also, particularly because very, very sadly we're cut off a lot from what happens in so-called mainland Europe, where there are many examples. I mean, if you spend any time in Netherlands, you can see.
Yeah, I was in Amsterdam literally 2 weeks ago. In Amsterdam, I went on their little train thing and went all the way across the city for €2, and it was amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my lasting memories of Amsterdam was crossing this busy intersection, and a woman was coming along in a bike with a baby. And she hollered at me for being on the bike lane as a pedestrian. She said in Dutch, you have to wait until I've passed. You just can't walk across. I know it's a pedestrian crossing, but you need to understand that bikes come first. I get
that. It's like Copenhagen. No, it's definitely
there's so many examples.
A lot.
Yeah, and it's important tap into all of that good practice and see how much of it we can embody here. And I know
Yeah,
Wales is doing so much.
totally. And Stephen Gethin's book, Nation to Nation, you know, I haven't finished all of it, but it's a great example of how we can learn from our European counterparts and bring that call in rather than call out, which is pretty cool. I think he's a great speaker. Yeah.
I mean, that's very important. And I've got a friend, Elliot Bulmer. He and I, week in, week about, we write a column in the Sunday National. And he's written 2 books on a Scottish constitution, which I strongly commend to everybody. But his point is that as he travels across the world quite a lot, he says one of the things you notice about developed countries that are confident is they're not afraid of strangers. Mm-hmm. Nations which are not confident in themselves are very afraid of strangers. You know, we don't like immigrants. Why? Well, because they're immigrants. Yeah, but you know, most countries are full of immigrants. I mean, if you want to go way back, I mean, where do you think Robert the Bruce came from? He came from Normandy. His family, you know, I mean, it's a nonsensical argument in most respects. But he sees quite a big difference between well-educated, well-developed countries and the way they welcome strangers, and those who are less well-educated and less knowledgeable who don't.
Totally. And if you call that out, if you use your voice to call that out, there's always going to be someone on the opposition saying that you're an exceptionalist. And that's not true. You know, earlier on this year when, you know, Priti Patel was on about the Rwanda flight, you know, I made a comment on Twitter saying, you know, the Scottish government, we wouldn't do that. Our policy was definitely not to send, you know, vulnerable people on a plane to Rwanda. And I got called an exceptionalist. The Scottish Daily Express put up an article saying Pro-indy folk singer calls Scots better than rest of UK. And they ultimately took the quotation mark out of that because it was a lie. You know, I put in a report against them, and, you know, ultimately the IEPs, whatever, sided with them. But yeah, if you call that out, you call that that fragility of, oh, we're terrified of immigration X, Y, and Z. If you call out the hostile immigration policies of the UK, you're called a Scottish exceptionalist. Yeah. And I'm just like, no, we're just trying to be, you know, treat people with humanity.
Yeah, I suspect some of this comes from an older generation that dominates the media. I mean, I know we see young people in the media, but I mean, precious few, frankly.
Just today, there's been new. Yeah, but I'm really excited to see that there's been Laura Webster has just been made I think complete editor of the National, and she's my age. That's really cool. More of that, please. Like, I mean, absolutely. And also in the Edinburgh and Times and the Glasgow, like, we're seeing more and more young voices coming through. And I don't want to be ageist or anything, but these are the people that are finger on the pulse, the immediate news source. They're constantly online.
You betcha. My bigger concern is the people behind the scenes. Those are 2 enlightened. You meant the examples you gave us are enlightened appointments, but I worry that not all senior managers take the same view. In fact, the fact that they are exceptional suggests that they don't take the same view. They're much more conservative. I mean, one of the things I noticed some time ago was how odd and isolationist. I mean, you were called exceptionalist, but the UK by and large is somewhat isolationist in its government policies. I mean, for example, thousands of people in the UK, if they're asked to draw a Spitfire, can do a passable effort. If you ask most people in Germany to draw a Messerschmitt, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, it's a hankering back to a lost age, a need to go back instead of looking forward to take solace in what happened or they think happened, because a lot of it is mythological. I mean, you often hear things like, we beat the Germans. Well, this is nonsense. The Americans and the Russians, who lost millions of troops, were the major contributors to that defeat.
I mean, it just, this sort of like, I'm just thinking the red, white, and blue Spitfires going over at the Jubilee and all that kind of stuff. Like this, it really triggers me, and it's really silly. But like, the world view of us is that we're a bit of a laughingstock. And
Yeah.
I brought this up at a conference this year. There was a German Green MEP there, and he said, actually, no, Iona, you're not even a laughingstock anymore. We're just done with the situation. We're done talking about Brexit. We're tired. We've moved on. So the worry is that Scotland's left behind. But yeah, this whole just British flag, Union Jack, like it's just exhausting. Like 9 times out of 10, when I'm getting a nasty comment on Twitter, it's either got RFC, WATP, or some sort of Union Jack in their profile. 9 times out of 10, and it's just this collective group thinking that it's like, we don't like Iona, so we're going to pile on her. We don't like her because of her views. We don't like her because she is singing in this language or whatever. But there was a comment there from Robert Chunion saying that, getting tell off for saying aye. Well, my dad was actually belted at school for using the Doric dialect of the Scots language, like physically belted. Nowadays, we are celebrating Scots a little bit more. There's something called the Scots Language Award, which kids in National 5 and higher and advanced higher, they can do at some specific schools, which means it's a bit of a postcode lottery. But one school that does offer it is Banff Academy up in the northeast, and you can basically study the Scots language in different forms. So I guess in media studies and music and literary works as well. And at the end of it, you'll come away with a qualification, which is really exciting. I would like to see that be a National 5 or a higher. I'd also like to see more in the curriculum. Right now, there's a lot of, when you're doing English, there's a lot of like Scottish poetry, but it's in English. Or when you do your Nat 5, your standard grades, O levels, when you're doing your music, there's a whole list of great songs you can choose from if you want to do Gaelic song. But if you want to do Scots song, which you can go and study at university, if you apply to the conservatoire to do the folk music course, you either apply to do Gaelic song or Scots song. So you need to have the expertise in either. But there's a whole list at standard grade of what your Gaelic songs would be, but there's not a developed list of what your Scots songs would be. And a lot of them is just your kind of like skyboat songs that are actually written in English, but they are songs from Scotland. So there's so much work that we can do with education. And I think that having a Scots Language Act, which is what Urvyce, that's OORVYCE.Scot, organisation that I co-founded, that's what we're trying to do, is to lobby for a Scots Language Act and a Scots Language Board, similar to Board na Gaelic. So there was a public consultation on the new Scottish Languages Bill. That is closed. I think that closed yesterday or tomorrow, either the 6th or 8th or December. So that'll be really interesting. And that'll advise the civil servants on what the policy actually is. Then the Scots Language Board going forward would be able to feed in to policy forever going forward. Back in 2014, there was a cross-party group in Scots. Of course, I wasn't involved. I was 16 years old. I was in secondary school. But we've actually just started that up again. Emma Harper, MSP, has started that. And despite, in 2021, when everyone was campaigning, so many candidates signed what was called the Scots Pledge. And that pledge was basically to commit to Scots language protection, promotion, funding, and an act. So many candidates signed that from all parties. And a number of them have disappeared off the earth since being elected. One Alexander Burnett of Aberdeenshire West has disappeared off the earth after signing that. So it's interesting to see how this works, how many people will sign your pledge when they need votes, and then how many people run and desert. We have a cross-party group now, and we really would like to see some Labour, Lib Dems and Conservatives joining it as well, because that's what a CPG is. But yeah, Scots is really important, but we are really getting the horrible side of it on social media. Nasty stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost inevitable, but and it's easy for people who are not exposed to that sort of vitriol to say, "Oh, just grin and bear it." it's much harder when you're actually underneath the detritus that comes pouring out of social media. I have every sympathy for you. Just moving on a little bit, talk about the future and politics. We've had the Supreme Court judgment. If you had to do, as the Americans say, look down the pike to next year, maybe the year after, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't think the Supreme Court judgment was a surprise to anyone, to be honest. I think this was just a box-ticking exercise that we had to go through. But it's interesting to see that the narrative has changed from we want to vote on independence to we want our democracy. I think the result has simply solidified that as a case and as something that we can not spin but utilize, because to other normal countries which have working democracies, this doesn't bode well at all. Being in Germany the week before the case was announced, I was telling every audience, please keep your fingers crossed, even though I knew deep down that this was a box-ticking exercise. It's funny because the way that the world sees this is much in a much more beautiful way than some of our own see us. Like in America, I mean, the gig is a 90-minute gig, and we do songs like Freedom Kamoye. We do songs like Scotland Yet, which is on this little tote bag. It's a Davy Steele song. I've got this, it's the worst quality tote bag ever. But we do songs like Woody Guthrie's Deportees that I've rewritten. It's political in nature. Like there was, it was really lovely. At one of our gigs in Germany, there was a group of SDP members, so young, but they were
Social
also
Democrats.
members. Yeah, so Young Social Democrats, the Party of Germany. They were maybe in their 20s. They come along to the gig and they were like, yeah, we're actually members of YSI, which is the Young Scots for Independence. So it was so lovely that, and they actually came with their Aberdeen Football Club scarves on, because ironically there is a cross section of young folk in Germany who are both independent supporters and Aberdeen supporters. Incredible. I know, incredible. But
Stephen Flynn ought to be in touch.
Yeah, I know, Stephen. That's exactly it. It was lovely the way that, like, in America, everyone is. It's difficult because there's definitely this cross section of kind of republicanism that also supports Scottish independence. I don't think we saw much of it, apart from maybe in Montana. I think the states that we were touring were quite progressive, quite liberal states. You're always going to get that not Montana, no. It was lovely to be there, but that was the only place in my entire 5 weeks that I saw a Confederate flag being flown. It was interesting, but there's this intersectionality of republicanism and support in Scotland, which is, that's fine. They can do whatever they want to do, but I don't really want to hear about your genealogical makeup, because in Scotland, our policy is, if you want to come here, if you want to, be a Scot, we'll call you a Scot. We'll call you a new Scot. You can be one of us. That's the whole point of being a welcoming society, is that we don't care about your genealogical makeup. Like that, I don't think so.
Or your gender affiliation, perhaps, as well. So
at all, yeah. And actually, on tour in America, I was touring with not a trans person, but a non-binary person. So they were just they them, and it really didn't bother me or faze me. I didn't care. They were employed to play the bouzouki and the guitar. I didn't care how they wanted me to call them. I'll call them whatever they want.
And what was the audience reaction in Montana, if they were aware? Were they aware of the?
I'm not too sure, because I mean, on stage I would refer to them as they them, and no one really piped up, made a mess about it. But there were situations where Colin Pierce were going, "Oh, welcome back onto the stage, Iona and the boys," and I was like, maybe we could just call it the band. Why is it like so gendered to begin with? Like, what I really struggle with is that, like, the musicians that I employ are sometimes called the incredible, formidable, talented, blah, blah, blah. And then it's, oh, and the beautiful Iona Fife. I'm like, well, I would rather be called like talented and formidable and beautiful, not than beautiful. But so there's a lot of issues within like the industry of like how we're treating people of different genders and like tropes that we all have. And it was interesting. I love him. Like, I totally love touring in America. It's lovely. And some of the areas that we went to were, you know, beyond progressive, just a really lovely society to be in and welcoming people. Like, actually, I'm going to be honest, in the whole 5 weeks, I don't think I met anyone that I didn't like, which is amazing because I'm not a very likable person. No, I'm joking.
No, but I mean, that was my reaction in the States as well. But then I'd turn on television and I'd hear some preacher ranting about gays and abortion and stuff. And I think, oh, good God.
But you can walk down Buchanan Street and hear that as well.
Of course you can. Well,
constantly hearing
I mentioned the cab driver at the top of the show. Now, I'm not suggesting he was prejudiced. He may have just been merely ignorant about what mosques are, but who knows? So as you look ahead a couple of years down the pike, bearing in mind that the yes vote appears to be on an upward trajectory, how long do you think Westminster can sustain this anti-democratic position?
I mean, they've been doing it for 8 years. And I don't know what is going to happen, to be honest. Like, I am concerned. In the leadership election over the summer, it was almost like they were trying to outflank each other on just how much they would like to annihilate and alienate Scotland. That was a really interesting point. You know, Penny Mordaunt was saying, oh, I would have a hard line on the Scots. I would have a hard line on no independence referendum. It's like, for them, the brownie points is how much they can alienate us.
Yeah.
And I think that will probably, that trend will continue to happen. Do I think that Starmer is going to be any softer? Absolutely not. Do I think that Labour are going to win the next general election? Yes. Am I concerned that, you know, the reshuffling of the constituencies in Scotland is meaning that we're going to lose some seats? Really concerned about that. I really, really don't want to lose some of the MPs that we have. I think one of them, Eastern Bartonshire's, you know, Amy Callaghan's seat is there was a list of seats that could be overtaken by Labour, which is concerning. Do I think that young people need to get out and do a little bit more? Probably. Yeah. I mean, as much as we can do, we can always sit on our laps and tweet whatever, but you know, my health being well, I would love to go out leafleting and door chapping. You know, in our last election, I went up to my home constituency of Aberdeenshire West and door chapped with Fergus Much, who, of course, wasn't elected. Alexander Burnett was, but we saw a downswing in Lib Dem votes, so that was a tactical win. I really don't know what is going to happen. I'm presuming that Keir Starmer is going to continue to be the leader of the Labour Party. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to change his mind.
You know, you would expect, as we get closer to an election, that the media will turn ferociously anti-Labour. I mean, right now, you know, they're more than happy to give Starmer a place, but they were more than happy to give his predecessor coverage. It only got nasty with Corbyn, both internally and externally, when it looked like he might do well in a general election. And the same thing, I think, will happen to Starmer, which means that any expectation of having a large majority is probably unrealistic. He may well squeak through by a couple of votes. In that case, he would then be dependent on one of the opposition parties to form a coalition. Now, he's already said he will not do any deals with the SNP. But then we both know what happens when politicians are put in extremis. They make decisions based upon their own self-interest rather than any commitments they made previously. So the likelihood is he would cut a deal with whoever is going to keep him in power, or put him in power rather. He wants to be able to go to the palace and say, I can command a majority in the House. And if that means tapping into 50 possible 50 SNP MPs, then I suspect that's what he will jolly well do.
It's interesting you say palace, because, you know, this time tomorrow night, the world is going to see the first 3 installments of the Harry and Meghan Netflix show. I think there's going to be some revelations that no one has had access to. There's been no pressers. The media has not laid eyes on the 3 episodes. I think the royal family and the monarchy and the institution will be in grave danger of having not very little popularity. But I think it's going to be very exciting. I'm definitely going to watch. When they did, was it Oprah? What was it? Yeah, it was Oprah. It was that was, I remember it was March 2021. That was incredible. And I think that we're going to be exposed to racism, institutional racism, and we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, it's been blown straight open the last week with the trailer dropping, Kate and William being in Boston, you know, the lady in waiting, Susan Hussey, resigning. I think that the world could change in the next 24 hours, and not enough of us are listening. I think that I'm going to watch it as soon as it drops, because I'm a total loser, and I'm also unemployed. I'm joking. I'm not unemployed. I'm self-employed. I get to decide what I do. Does Iona recall that Michelle Mone threatened to move south of the border of Scotland forward for independence 2014? Now that we know why she was elevated to the House of Lords. Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to deal with that at the end of the show.
Okay, you can deal with that.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you see this as a more widespread malaise, though, across a range of British institutions, not just the monarchy? We've got, I mean, politics has never been held in lower esteem than it is just now, Westminster politics, where you've got politicians who have effectively given up on government. They now act as a conduit for public money being dispersed to friends and colleagues. And I'm not saying anything that's not there in the public prints. We've got the monarchy looking more frail than ever before. We've got politics looking absolutely desperate. We've got the police are constantly under attack. We've got the NHS, which is struggling as best it can to cope with reduced funding, and always and ever the threat of privatization. And these were, you know, even just 10 years ago, these were formidable institutions. The state rested upon these pillars, which looked rock solid, but now all of them appear to be crumbling in front of our eyes. We can't, even the civil service, you know, a lot of these contracts that we talked about, where money was channeled to Baroness Mone and whoever, that was done against the advice of the civil servants. They said, Minister, you shouldn't be doing this. But they went ahead and facilitated the payments. Now that means that there's institutional rot now in the civil service.
Absolutely, but this, I mean, even in 2016, Alexander Burnett was, you know, investigated for cash for questions. We've always seen corruption within the Tory party, and also, I guess, perhaps within any party. That's the thing, is that there's always going to be someone that's going to get the contract, but it should be up to tender. These VIP lanes, they are unethical to begin with, and especially when the PPE isn't actually delivered. I mean, just today we've heard that Matt Hancock says he's not actually going to stand for election at the next election. Now, people are jumping ship. Last week it was Sajid Javid, and now it's Matt Hancock. It's who is going to be left in, you know, what was perhaps frontline politics two years ago. We're seeing
here's a thought, Iona. You and I should run. We should form a political party, and we'd be elected.
Oh wow!
We'd be elected. We would only have one platform, and it would consist purely of, we intend to put all the people who took public money illegally, unlawfully in jail. Tell you what, we wouldn't be able to count the votes. There'd be so many.
Yeah, I mean, there should be, but the thing is like your general person who is not politically engaged, they are not seeing issues. They are blaming, you know, the refugees that are coming here. They're blaming people who have issues with addiction. They're blaming the homeless. They're blaming what they can see. They're not engaged enough to realize that actually, whilst we're being distracted with everything over here, the backroom deals and the shady
Yeah,
business is
that's true.
getting away in plain sight.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
unfortunately, it's about changing people's mind about how we need to treat people. And yeah, it's interesting that Michelle has taken leave of absence from the House of Lords. I think that is an indictment in itself.
But hold on a second. How can you take leave of absence from an institution that doesn't require attendance anyway? This is not like a proper job. This is not like
Yeah,
you
I know,
saying,
but they're
"I need a gig."
yeah, they're paid £300 per sitting, and pro
Yeah.
rata if they go in for the afternoon or the morning, that's
Oh,
also
no,
paid as well.
no, let's be accurate here. It's not per sitting, it's per attendance. So
Okay, per attendance.
if I'm a baron and you're a baroness, we're in London, we decided to earn £600, we each turn up on a Monday or a Tuesday, whatever. That way we're entitled to the £600. We go off and have a cup of coffee and then go back the next day and charge another £600. You don't have to actually do anything. You don't have to actually have a vote. You just turn up and tick the box. Say, I've been there. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that how subsidized the meals are in Westminster. Like, I just think that it's horrific. You're going across the road next to Portcullis House and people are on the street begging.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people are lapping up in the members' room. You know what? I can imagine like why people are so disengaged, because there was a time between 2014 and maybe 2018, 19, where I was just done. The 2014 vote, my first ever vote when I was 16, that didn't go my way. And then the 2016 Brexit vote, which I genuinely thought was never going to go through, that never went my way. So I became completely not connected at all. And at the time I was I was studying music. I was busy at conservatoire doing my craft. And only really between 2020 and now have I become a lot more involved in the Musicians Union again, going to the STUC Congress, being a little bit more involved in my party, whether that be, going to YSI conferences or singing at events or, endorsing candidates or door chapping. And I just think that a lot of people say, oh, you're going to alienate yourself from 55% of the population. But you know what, abroad and at other markets, they don't really care. Like the only thing that I can get, there's actually some people on Twitter that say, don't like your politics, but I like your music, fair enough. But there's a lot of people that say, oh, I hate her, she can't sing, and people can't, divide this. I say, imagine this, a folk musician is political. Have you ever heard of the likes before? Oh, wow. I just can't believe that it's like it's a
I don't
crime.
understand why it should lead to all that pearl clutching. I mean, it's just, what would you expect from a folk singer? Except to be radical and to be political and whatever, Can we move on for a second? Just, I know you've got knee surgery coming up, and I think you're very appreciative of the NHS. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I have fibromyalgia and hypermobility syndrome. Fibromyalgia is a chronic, long-term, chronic pain and fatigue syndrome, which affects more women than men, and it's completely underfunded. There's not much research into it. It weakens your immune system, so much so that a cough, a cold, a flu, COVID could floor you for weeks, if not months. It's not treated like other immunosuppressant conditions. So, you're not given your flu shot. You're not in line for the COVID jab. You just have to deal with it. I have that. My knees have dislocated for several years. In 2019, I got one knee done, and that was 3 months on crutches, and it was intense. So I scheduled 3 months off work, which, I was 21 years old. I was just out of conservatoire. I had a few years of self-employment, my tax returns in, of course, but, not enough to actually get any UK government help. There were some great charities like Help Musicians and PRS that I could apply for. And the same is going to go around this time, is that I'm, as a self-employed freelancer, I'm not, the way that my business is set up is that I'm not going to get any help from DWP, from Universal Credit. I'm not going to get that. I employ people, it is a business. I'm not
Yep.
going to get that help. So I'm amazed. I mean, having fibromyalgia, if I had to pay for my prescription that I have, you know, painkillers, duloxetine, like all these things that I need to make sure that I can just function, £9 per item every couple of weeks, months, I couldn't afford it. I literally could not afford it. Just the fact that we get our prescriptions in Wales and in Scotland, I might add, because every time I bring this up, someone goes, "Oh, well, it's not free. We pay for it." Well, it's free at the point of use because it's a political choice to make it free. And Wales, as another devolved nation, also makes this political choice. So yeah, if I was living in England or in America or in other places, these medications, I would be bankrupt. Number two, you know, I've had several surgeries over my, as I present as perfectly able-bodied, but having fibromyalgia and dislocating bones and being on crutches and pins in my knee, I'm not perfectly abled, but I present as such. But having all these different surgeries at different times in my life has played havoc with my career touring. I am lucky enough to have a date for 21st of December, which means that I will be able to go to Kansas City to do my voluntary position at Folk Alliance in January. But it is 3 months on crutches, so I've cancelled. I don't have a gig at Connections. I don't have much shows coming up. I'm away into 3 months of you know, a lot of pain and learning how to walk again, because effectively it's not just knee, you know, replacement. It's very complicated. It's a major surgery. So I went yesterday for my ECG and my bloods and all that kind of stuff. And you know, just if I was in America, I'd be paying thousands for this. So like, I will always, you know, loving the NHS and that we need it to be funded properly is a hill I will die on. And anyone that says, "Oh, the NHS records in Scotland are horrendous," well, I got listed in January, and I'm getting it now. But you won't see mainstream media talk about that at all. We're only hearing stories about pensioners who are waiting 5 years for their hip surgery in, you know, the middle of Scunthorpe or something. We're not hearing about how great the Scottish NHS is. We're not hearing the good news stories because it doesn't fit their narrative. Like, for example, a few months ago, I had an impact.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's wonderful you're getting the surgery. I hate the idea that you have to hobble around and you're in pain, but it's good you get a decent prescription. I mean, you're going to go all the way to Kansas City, which is no mean feat. We're not talking about going around the corner, getting on a tram and saying, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to nip to the other side of Glasgow." You're talking about going to Kansas City. I assume you'll have to do at least one change of aircraft.
At least three. Yeah, so I'm an official showcase artist at Folk Alliance International, which is an industry-facing event. It's not really a gig per se. It's you know, you go there, you meet up with festivals, and you do little showcases, and then you know, someone might book you. But as part of that, I also have 2-3 days of board meetings that I have to sit through. And I've done, it's, you know, it's about 3,000 people in a Sheraton hotel. I've done this before, once on crutches before. It's exhausting. But yeah, I'm very committed to the commitments that I have, whether that be SGC stuff or musicians union stuff or the boards that I sit on, unpaid, may I add. Because it's great to have young people have a voice, because a lot of the time, you know, there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, we should change things, but they don't have the means to change things because you need new ideas coming through. But yeah, the idea of not working and also not having any help is terrifying. So I suggest people to buy some CDs, because that would help out a lot. And in the next
How do they do that?
They go onto my website, ionafyfe.com/shop, or my Bandcamp. I have
It's
3
coming up
actually.
on the screen now.
This goes very well. So
could you hold them up so that people here, folks, this is what you should be doing for Christmas. Go on to all the recording that Iona is showing you right now. You'll be able to get a hold of those if you go to ionafyfe.bandcamp.com/MERCH, which is short, obviously, for merchandise. And what you need to be doing now is rush out. Wait till the show's finished, obviously, and get. I'm going to do it, and there's no reason why anyone else can't do it. And
There's also little tote bags.
You can also get this wonderful bag. Scotland Jet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I mean, actually, there's another.
Peter Booth is saying he's going to do it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just a great way to, you know, supplement an income when you're not performing live, because live performance really is the crux of most people's income. And over the pandemic, I taught a lot. I did some Zoom teaching, which was pretty exhausting, not gonna lie. And you know, I made a Patreon where people can, you know, contribute monthly, which is cool. But at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, if I'm not performing, I'm either in a board meeting or something, or doing something, you know, and not getting paid. So much of the work as a musician is admin that you don't get paid for at all, or, you know, doing a lot of work. And sometimes it's not a thankless job. People are lovely and they applaud and they get CDs, but it's so difficult nowadays to make an income as a musician. And I'm surprised that, you know, when I was younger, when I was just between 14 and 16, I worked as a waitress, and it was so hard, unbelievably hard. So, you know, all of these like workers going on strike, I support them completely, because since then, I've been lucky to just make my living as a musician. A few health hiccups along the way, and COVID, and, you know, Brexit, all of the stuff that's been thrown at us. You know, just at the Trad Awards the other night, I was performing live on BBC ALBA, and, you know, it was a celebration of all of the award winners and nominees and performers. And it's just, we have such a thriving cultural scene in Scotland that is just unparalleled with some other nations. And we really, really support our musicians, and they are ambassadors. And when we go out and we heave Scotland up, we talk about it. I've actually got friends that have moved here from Paris because they're just in love with it so much. So I don't know. I hate it when somebody calls me a separatist or whatever. I just feel happy to live here and reap the benefits of living here. So yeah, support Scotland and support me, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. We've put up the material. We'll keep running it on the strip at the foot of the screen, and I would encourage everybody to go. Besides, the reality is that increasingly, you know, with Brexit and all the rest of it making life difficult for gigs, etc., how are you going to access Fiona's material? The easiest way is to go online and to order the material. What about Spotify? Is it on Spotify? Will you get paid if it's on Spotify?
Interesting. So yeah, the best way to support an artist is either on their own website or Bandcamp. Now, Spotify is almost a necessary evil. Daniel Ek, who's the CEO of Spotify, has just bought Helsing, an artificial intelligence military organization. He is a very rich man. He put a bid in for Arsenal. And if you stream my music on Spotify, for each stream, I will get 0.003 pence. If that. So to make what you would get from an album sale, you'd have to have hundreds of thousands of streams, which is ridiculous.
Anyway, what to do, folks, is go on to Iona's website, which you've seen on screen, and place your order there. Encourage as many of you as you can possibly do, and tell all your friends. It's Christmas time, for crying out loud. Get on the site.
And I've got like little notes. Another thing that I'm going to do over the next, we've just got like 1 minute left, but over the next while, I'm going to open commissions up. So if somebody wants me to record a video of me playing the piano and singing a song of their choice and shout out to a loved one of their choice, I'm going to be opening that commission up. So just check my Twitter out or my Facebook, and that'll be in the next week or so.
Excellent, Fiona. Super. You're a perfect guest. We're very, very grateful to you for being with us, and I wish you every success, not just with the music, because I know that's going to be successful, I've heard it, but also with your surgery, and I hope that goes well, and particularly with your trip to the States, because I've seen people on crutches trying to change planes. It's not easy, folks. It's not easy, believe you me. So thanks, everyone. Hope you can stick around for a few minutes. I'm just going to make a few concluding remarks, and we can perhaps have a quick chat. So there we are, folks. Again, another fantastic show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. That's our time's up now. Big thanks to Fiona. And a big thanks to all of you out there for joining us tonight. Hope you've enjoyed this TNT show. As ever, we have a formidable list of guests lined up for future shows. As you can see, this is the place for the big hitters, the folks who matter, the folks who make things happen. If you want to find out more about the TNT show and other shows, events and podcasts on Indie Live, go to indielive.net. The TNT show is back next week, December 7th, same time, when we will be joined by Welsh Constitution expert Glenda Jones. Don't miss that. If you want and are interested in a Welsh perspective, a perspective from Wales about constitutional change, and remember, if you haven't already seen it, Professor McAllister and our colleagues published a report yesterday on constitutional change, which the Welsh government sponsored to some degree, and it did not rule out independence. So hopefully we'll be talking to Professor McAllister when she's free next year. But in the meantime, we're talking to Glenda Jones. Please also look out for my column in the Sunday National. You'll find it in the 7 Days supplement. Oh, by the way, with all the goings on with Michelle Mone, Baroness Mone, listen to this. On November the 30th, while the rest of you are celebrating St Andrew's Day, the Tories in the House of Lords voted to specifically continue, and I quote, preferential treatment on suppliers connected to or recommended by members of the House of Commons or members of the House of Lords, close quote. There you go. On St Andrew's Day, the Tories wanted to persist with favouritism. Boy, oh boy. Oh, by the way, the poll I mentioned at the top of the show, a big advance for you. It looks like almost the entire increased support for Labour has come from disaffected Tories. So that's the show. Crowdfunder, to all of you out there, thanks for joining us. Stay safe and take care. Good night, all.